Hollywood is usually a place full of loud noises. You hear the helicopters buzzing over the mansions, the loud music at parties, and the shouting on movie sets. But lately, there was a different kind of noise in the air. It wasn't loud, but it felt heavy. The big movie studios were scared. For years, they had been making movies using computers. They built cities and monsters on screens, but they forgot about the people. The actors were starting to look the same. The stories felt like copies of old ones. And the audiences were getting tired of it. While all this panic was happening, one man was riding his motorcycle through the busy streets. He was wearing a helmet and simple leather clothes. If you looked closely, you would recognize him. It was Keanu Reeves. But he wasn't acting like a big movie star. He was just moving through the city like a ghost. Keanu parked his bike near an old, run-down diner on the edge of town. He took off his helmet and shook his hair. Even though he is famous, nobody really bothered him. People in this city are used to seeing stars. But Keanu felt different that day. He could feel the worry in the town. He knew something the studio bosses didn't know. He knew that the people were hungry for something real. Inside the diner, a young director was sitting alone. He looked exhausted. His name isn't important, but his face told a story. He had dark circles under his eyes, and he was staring at a cold cup of coffee. This young man had a dream. He wrote a script that was full of heart. It was a story about real people, real pain, and real hope. He didn't want any computer effects. He wanted to build real sets and use real film, but the studio bosses had laughed at him. They said his ideas were old-fashioned. They told him nobody wants to watch real people suffer anymore. They want flashing lights and superheroes. Go away and come back when you have a comic book. The young director was ready to give up. He was thinking about leaving Hollywood and going back home. He felt like he didn't belong in a world that only cared about money and machines. Then the bell on the diner door rang. Keanu Reeves walked in. He didn't make a big entrance. He just walked in, sat on a stool at the counter, and ordered a black coffee. The young director didn't look up. He was too lost in his own sadness. Keanu noticed the young man. He noticed the pile of papers next to the coffee cup. He saw the way the young man's shoulders were slumped forward. Keanu knew that look. He had seen it many years ago when he was just starting. He knew the feeling of having a fire inside you that the world wants to put out. After a few minutes, Keanu picked up his coffee and walked over to the young man's booth. "Is this seat taken?" Keanu asked softly. The young man looked up, startled. When he saw who it was, his eyes went wide. He almost dropped his fork. No, it's free. Please sit down." Keanu sat down. He didn't act like a celebrity. He acted like a regular guy taking a break. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," Keanu said, taking a sip of his coffee. "I think I am," the young man said nervously. "Or at least the weight of a failed screenplay." Keanu smiled a little. "Can I see it?" The young man hesitated. He was embarrassed. But there was something kind in Keanu's eyes that made him feel safe. He pushed the stack of papers across the table. Keanu didn't just skim it. He read. He sat there for a long time. The diner got busy. The noise level went up, but Keanu was focused. He read the words on the page like they were music. The more he read, the more his face changed. He stopped looking like the tired guy on the motorcycle. He started to look alive. When he finally put the papers down, the young man held his breath. "Is it bad?" he asked. "No," Keanu said. His voice was serious. "It's not bad. It's dangerous. Dangerous. In a good way," Keanu explained. He leaned in closer. "The studios hate this kind of stuff. They hate it because it can't be fixed by a computer. You can't edit a soul. You can't generate real emotion with a button. That is why they laughed at you. Because they are scared of stories like this." The young man felt a tear form in his eye. "So that's it? I should just quit? If the studios are scared, then there's no hope." Keanu shook his head slowly. He looked out the window at the Hollywood sign in the distance. "Something big is coming to this town," Keanu said quietly. "I can feel it. The air is changing. People are waking up. They are tired of the fake stuff. They want the truth? He turned back to the young director. And I know the truth when I see it. This script is the truth. The young man couldn't believe what he was hearing. You really think so? I don't think, Keanu said. I know, and I'm not just an actor. I'm a worker, just like you. If you are willing to fight for this, to do the hard work, to bleed for this art, then I will stand next to you. The silence in the diner felt heavy again, but this time it wasn't a sad silence. It was an exciting silence. It was the silence before a storm. We can't go to the big guys, Keanu said, his mind racing with plans. They will try to own it. They will try to change it. We have to do this differently. We have to be quiet. We have to build this in the shadows. Keanu pulled out a pen. On the back of a napkin, he scribbled a phone number. He slid it across the table. Don't call the studios, Keanu said, standing up. Call me. We have a lot of work to do, and we don't have much time. Keanu put some money on the table for the coffee and walked out. He put his helmet back on, started his motorcycle, and rode away. The young director sat there, looking at the napkin, looking at the door where the movie star had just left. For the first time in months, the fear was gone. In its place was a spark? The rumors in Hollywood were right. Something big was coming, but it wasn't a robot. It wasn't a sequel. It was a secret plan, born in a dusty diner, led by a man who knew that the only way to save the future was to remember. What made the past great? The young man grabbed his script. It wasn't just paper anymore. It was a weapon. And Keanu Reeves was the only person in Hollywood brave enough to help him use it. Keanu Reeves didn't just go home to sleep after meeting the young director in the diner. He went to work. The meeting had lit a fire in him, but now he had to be careful. Hollywood is like a small village where everyone talks. If the studio bosses knew what he was planning, they would crush the project before it even started. The project, the something big that Keanu knew was coming, was going to be a movie made the old way. It was going to be about feelings and real danger. But to make it happen, Keanu had to play a double game. During the day, he was the friendly movie star. He went to big, fancy meetings on studio lots. He drank expensive water in glass offices and shook hands with men in expensive suits. These men were the gatekeepers. They were the ones who decided what the world watched. They didn't care about stories. They cared about numbers. They sat Keanu down and showed him graphs on big screens. Keanu, look at this, one executive said, pointing to a line going up. People love robots. People love green screens. They don't want to see a guy crying in a real room. They want to see explosions in space. We want to give you $50 million to do another sci-fi movie. Just wear the black coat again. Keanu sat there listening. He nodded his head politely. He looked at the graphs, but he was thinking about the script in his jacket pocket. He was thinking about the truth. The suits were terrified. They could feel the audiences getting bored, but their only answer was to make things louder and brighter. They didn't understand that the world was hungry for something real, something that touched the heart. That sounds interesting, Keanu lied smoothly. Let me think about it. He left the office feeling heavy. The air in those buildings was stale. It smelled like fear and money. He got into his car and drove away, leaving the shiny glass towers behind. He didn't go home? He drove to a different part of town, a place where the streets were dusty and the buildings looked like old warehouses. This was the secret location for the new movie. It wasn't a glamorous studio lot. It was a rented space that smelled like sawdust and paint. When Keanu walked in, the mood was completely different. There were no suits here. There were people working. He found the young director in the middle of the floor, arguing with a carpenter about a wall. They weren't arguing because they were angry. They were arguing because they both cared about how it looked. No, it has to be wood, the director said. Real wood. Not plastic painted to look like wood. Real wood is heavy, the carpenter complained. Why does it matter? The camera won't know the difference. Keanu walked up to them and put a hand on the carpenter's shoulder. The camera might not know, Keanu said gently. but the actors will know. If we touch it and it feels fake, we will act fake. The audience feels that. Give him the wood. The carpenter looked at Keanu, shrugged, and went to find the lumber. The young director looked at Keanu with relief. I thought you were going to take the deal with the big studio, the director said. I saw the news. They are offering you a fortune. Keanu took off his jacket and started rolling up his sleeves. He wasn't here to be a boss. He was here to work. I didn't take the deal, Keanu said. They want to make a product? We are making a film. There is a difference. A product is made to be sold. A film is made to be felt. This became the rule for the set. Keanu wasn't just the star. He was the protector. He used his own money to keep the lights on. He hired people who had been forgotten by the industry. He found a camera operator who hadn't worked in 10 years because he refused to use digital cameras. He found a makeup artist who loved doing things by hand instead of using computers to fix faces later. The atmosphere on the set was special. It was quiet and focused. Everyone knew they were building something secret. They felt like they were stealing a piece of history back from the machines, but it wasn't easy. Making a movie with real things is harder than using computers. If it rained, they got wet. If someone tripped, they really fell. There were days when the money ran low and the producers panicked. There were moments when the studio sent spies to try to find out what Keanu was doing. One afternoon, a black sedan pulled up outside the warehouse. A man in a suit stepped out. He wasn't a movie fan. He was a lawyer sent by the big studios to shut them down. He walked onto the set, stepping over cables and ignoring the crew. Looking for Keanu, he found Keanu helping the young director set up a scene. Mr. Reeves, the lawyer said coldly, we need to talk. My clients have heard you are producing a competing project. They own the rights to this genre. If you don't stop, they will sue you. They will bury you in paperwork until you are broke. The set went silent. Everyone stopped working. They were scared. These were the people who owned Hollywood. They couldn't fight them. Keanu stood up slowly. He wiped some dust off his hands. He looked at the lawyer, but he didn't look angry. He looked calm. Tell your clients, Keanu said, his voice low and steady, that this isn't a competition. You can't own a feeling. You can't copyright the truth. And tell them that we aren't going to stop. The lawyer sneered. You are making a mistake. The world has moved on. Nobody wants this old-fashioned junk. Keanu looked around the room. He looked at the tired crew members holding heavy wooden beams. He looked at the young director holding his script like a shield. We aren't doing this for the world, Keanu said. We are doing this for the people who are tired of being lied to. Go back to your glass tower. We have work to do. The lawyer looked at Keanu's eyes and saw something he didn't expect. He didn't see an actor pretending to be tough. He saw a man who wasn't afraid of losing his money. He saw a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to give. The lawyer didn't know what to do with that. He turned around, walked out, and drove away. The crew let out a breath they didn't know they were holding. The young director looked at Keanu with amazement. They are going to come back harder, he said. I know, Keanu replied, picking up a hammer. That means we have to work faster. We have to build this movie so strong that when they see it, they won't be able to look away. They went back to work. The sound of hammering and sawing filled the warehouse again. Keanu knew the truth. The studios were fighting because they were scared. They were scared of the something big that was coming. They were scared of a story that didn't need computers to be magic. And Keanu, the man who usually stayed in the background, was ready to bring that story to life no matter the cost. The air inside the warehouse was thick with dust and determination. This wasn't a movie set where people sat around waiting for someone to bring them a latte. This was a place where people worked. The days were long, often stretching until the sun came up. Everyone was tired. Their backs hurt, their hands were rough, but their eyes were bright. They were building something real, brick by brick, and everyone could feel it. Keanu was there before anyone else arrived, and he was the last one to leave. He didn't have a fancy chair with his name on it. He sat on wooden crates and ate the same cold sandwiches everyone else ate. He wasn't acting like a boss. He was acting like a soldier in a quiet army. One afternoon they were filming a complicated scene. It wasn't a car chase or an explosion. It was a conversation between two characters in a rainstorm. But Keanu insisted on real rain. He didn't want the sprinklers that look like fake showers on TV. He wanted it to pour. He wanted the actors to be cold. He wanted the water to sting. Because that is what the story required. The young director was nervous. "Are we sure about this?" he asked, looking at the massive water tanks they had rented. "It's going to be freezing. We could just use the sound effects later." Keanu was already putting on his coat. He looked at the director with a soft smile. "If you are cold, the audience will feel cold," he said. "If you are uncomfortable, they will feel your pain. That is the magic. We have to go there so they can come with us." They filmed the scene for hours. The water came down in buckets. The crew wore heavy raincoats, but Keanu and the other actor were soaked to the bone. At one point, the other actor started shivering so hard he couldn't say his lines. The set went quiet. People were worried Keanu didn't call cut. He stepped closer to the actor, put an arm around his shoulder to share some body heat, and looked him in the eye. He didn't say anything about acting. He just said, "I'm here. Stay with me. Let's finish this." The actor took a deep breath, nodded, and they finished the take. When the director finally yelled cut, everyone on the set erupted. It wasn't just clapping. It was a roar of relief and respect. They had captured something alive. They had captured the truth, but making a movie this way comes with a price. It takes a toll on the body. A few days later, the schedule called for a stunt. It was a dangerous fall from a ladder. In a normal Hollywood movie, they would use a digital dummy or a green screen. Keanu refused. He said if the camera sees a real person hit the ground, the audience will hold their breath. He insisted on doing it himself. The stunt coordinator, a tough woman who had seen it all, tried to stop him. "Keanu, let the stunt guy do it," she begged. "If you get hurt, we stop shooting. We lose the movie. If I don't do it, we lose the soul of the movie," Keanu said calmly. He climbed up the ladder. The warehouse went silent. 50 people stood still, looking up. He wasn't showing off. He was focused. When he jumped, it wasn't graceful like a bird. It was heavy and hard like a human body falling. He landed, rolled, and lay still for a second. The stunt coordinator ran to him. "Keanu, talk to me." Keanu slowly sat up. He winced, holding his side. He was bruised, maybe a little banged up, but he was smiling. "Did we get it?" he asked. "We got it," she whispered. He stood up, shook off the pain, and walked back to the ladder. "Okay," he said. "Let's do it one more time, just to be safe." The crew looked at him in disbelief. He was tougher than the characters he played on screen. He didn't have a force field. He had grit. While this was happening inside the warehouse, the outside world was getting louder. The studio executives were angry. They had heard rumors that Keanu was making a movie without them, and they were terrified it might be good. They couldn't attack him directly because he hadn't signed a contract with them, so they used a different weapon. Rumors. Suddenly, gossip blogs and entertainment shows started running strange stories. "Keanu's secret project is a disaster," read one headline. "Star unhappy, chaos on set," said another. They even paid people to go on TV and say they had seen the footage, and it was terrible. The young director saw the news on his phone in the break room. His hands started shaking. "It's over," he said quietly to Keanu. "They are going to ruin us before we even finish. Nobody will want to watch a movie that everyone says is bad." Keanu took the phone, looked at the lies on the screen, and turned it off. He tossed it onto a pile of cables. "Let them lie," Keanu said. He walked over to a table covered in script pages. "Do you believe in these pages?" "Yes, more than anything." "Do you believe in the shots we took yesterday?" "The rain? The fall?" "Yes. Then that is the only truth that matters," Keanu said. He picked up a marker and started fixing a prop. "The noise outside is just that noise. Don't listen to it. Listen to the work. The work never lies. Keanu knew something the studios didn't. He knew that in the age of the internet, attention is the most valuable thing. By trying to destroy him, they were actually making people curious. The more they screamed that it was a disaster, the more people wondered, what are they so afraid of? He turned the studio's attack into a shield. He told the cast and crew to ignore the phones. He told them to treat the studio like a ghost. If you don't look at a ghost, it can't hurt you. For weeks, they operated like a submarine deep underwater. No communication with the surface. Just the hum of the cameras and the sound of Keanu's voice guiding the actors. He became the heart of the movie. When an actor forgot a line, he whispered it to them. When a light broke, he held it in place until they fixed the stand. There was a moment one evening when they were filming the final scene of the movie. It was a close-up of Keanu's face. It was the emotional climax of the whole story. The room was dead silent. The young director was holding his breath behind the monitor. Keanu looked into the camera lens. But he wasn't looking at a piece of glass. He was looking through the lens straight to the people who would one day sit in the dark theater. He thought about the struggle to get here. He thought about the diner, the warehouses, the bruises, and the lies. He let all of that pain and hope fill his eyes. The camera rolled. He didn't blink. A single tear rolled down his cheek. It wasn't fake. It was the truth. When the scene ended, there was no applause. Nobody could speak. The young director was crying. The cameraman took off his glasses and wiped his eyes. Even the tough stunt coordinator had to look away. Keanu wiped his face, took a deep breath, and stood up. That's a wrap, he said softly. The silence broke. It was like a dam bursting. Everyone hugged. They didn't hug because they made a movie. They hugged because they had survived a war. They had gone out into the wild and brought back something alive. Keanu stood in the middle of the chaos, smiling. He knew the fight wasn't over. The movie still had to be seen. But for the first time, he knew they had won. He had proof now, locked inside the camera, that the truth was stronger than the noise. Something big was definitely coming to Hollywood. It was coming from this dusty warehouse, and it was coming for them. The filming was finished, but the hardest part was just beginning. The movie now existed on hard drives, locked away in a small editing room in the city. It was raw and unpolished. This is the stage where most movies lose their soul. Editors usually cut out the quiet moments to make the movie faster, adding loud music to cover up the mistakes, but this time was different. Keanu sat in the dark editing room for days, working alongside the young director. They weren't cutting the film to make it flashy. They were cutting it to make it honest. They kept the long silences. They kept the mistakes where an actor looked nervous because it felt real. Keanu fought for every frame. He knew that the something big they had created wasn't about special effects. It was about making the audience feel like they were breathing the same air as the characters while they were hidden away building the movie. The storm outside was getting worse. The studio executives were angry that they couldn't stop the production, so they changed their plan. They decided that if they couldn't kill the movie, they would buy it. They wanted to own it so they could lock it in a vault and never let anyone see it. A powerful producer, a man known for crushing dreams, called Keanu. He invited him to a meeting at a very high-class restaurant. He promised a massive dinner and an even bigger check. Keanu agreed to go, but he didn't go for the food. He went to see the enemy up close. The restaurant was fancy. The waiters wore tuxedos and the water glasses were made of crystal. The producer sat at a large table, surrounded by lawyers. He didn't stand up when Keanu arrived. He just smiled a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Keanu," the producer said, sliding a thick envelope across the white tablecloth. "Inside is an offer. It is more money than you have ever seen. Just give us the movie. We will take care of it. We have the best marketing teams. We can make it a hit." Keanu didn't touch the envelope. He looked at the lawyers, then at the producer. "You don't want to make it a hit," Keanu said quietly. "You want to bury it. You're scared of what happens if people see a movie that doesn't need your robots. The producer laughed. Scared? Please. We are the business. We know what people want. Your movie is too slow. It's too sad. People want to escape. We will fix it. We will add some excitement. We will cut the boring parts. Keanu leaned forward. The restaurant was noisy, but his voice cut through the noise like a knife. The boring parts are the human parts. That is the story. If you take that away, there is nothing left. Then keep it, the producer snapped, losing his cool. But good luck showing it. We own the theaters. We own the advertising. If you don't sell to us, you are finished. No one will ever know this movie exists. Keanu stood up. He looked down at the envelope full of millions of dollars. It was enough money to buy anything he wanted. But he knew that once you sell the truth for money, you can never buy it back. We will find another way, Keanu said. He turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving the money on the table. He went back to the editing room with a new plan. The producer was right about one thing. The big theater chains were controlled by the studios. If Keanu tried to show his movie there, they would block him. So he decided to bypass them entirely. He reached out to the past. He contacted small, independent theaters. Old movie houses with just one screen, dusty projectors, and velvet seats that were tearing apart. These were places run by families, people who loved movies, not money. Keanu made a deal. He wouldn't charge them to show the movie. Instead, they would split the ticket sales. It was a crazy idea. There was no advertising, no big posters, and no press junkets. It was just a movie and a screen. The night of the first screening arrived. It wasn't in Hollywood. It was in a small town in a theater that usually played old classics. The young director was terrified. He sat in the back row, shaking. He was sure nobody would come, but then people started walking in. They weren't critics. They weren't VIPs. They were teachers, nurses, mechanics, and students. They had heard a whisper on the internet that a famous actor had made a secret movie, a real movie. They came because they were curious. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life. For 2 hours, the theater was silent. There was no checking of phones. No one whispered. The movie played, and the audience watched, captivated by the raw emotion on the screen. They saw the rain, the bruises, and the pain. They saw themselves. When the movie ended and the credits rolled, the lights stayed off for a moment. Then the audience began to clap. It started as a ripple and turned into a thunder of applause. People were standing up, shouting, and some were even crying. A young woman stood at the front of the theater. She held a microphone, her hand trembling slightly. How did it feel? She asked the crowd. It was real. Someone shouted from the back. I haven't felt like that in a cinema in 20 years. I forgot I was watching a screen, an old man said. It felt like I was living it. The cameras were rolling. This reaction wasn't fake. It was genuine. The studio executives watched the footage in their glass towers, and for the first time, they were silent. They saw that their threats and their money meant nothing. The people had spoken. They didn't want the polished lies. They wanted the messy, beautiful truth. Keanu stood in the shadows of the projector booth, watching the screen. He saw the faces of the audience light up. He turned to the young director. You were right, Keanu said. They were hungry. The news of the screening spread like wildfire. Not through TV ads, but through people talking to people. Social media exploded with messages saying, you have to see this movie. The something big that Keanu knew was coming had arrived. It wasn't a monster or a machine. It was a movement. The studio realized they had made a mistake. They had tried to treat a movie like a product, but Keanu treated it like a human being. And now, that human being was alive, and the whole world wanted to meet it. Keanu walked out of the theater into the cool night air. He put on his helmet. The fight wasn't over yet, but the battle for the soul of the story had been won. The movie didn't just open in theaters. It exploded across the world like a quiet thunder. It was strange to watch. Usually, when a big movie comes out, the streets are covered in posters and billboards, and you can't escape the commercials on TV, But this movie was different. It spread because people couldn't stop talking about it. It was the secret everyone was telling. In small towns and big cities alike, lines formed outside the independent theaters. People waited for hours in the rain and the cold just to get a ticket. They weren't lining up to see a superhero save the galaxy or to watch giant robots fight. They were lining up to watch real people talk, cry, and struggle. They were lining up to feel something. Inside the movie studios, the executives were panicking. Their own movies, the ones they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on, were sitting empty. They couldn't understand it. They looked at their charts and graphs, but the numbers didn't make sense. How could a movie made in a dusty warehouse without computer effects beat their carefully calculated products? The studio heads tried to fight back. They lowered ticket prices for their own movies. They offered free popcorn. They even ran commercials saying that real cinema was dead. But it was too late. The audience had tasted the truth, and they didn't want to go back to eating fake food. Keanu watched this all happen from a distance. He was happy, of course, but he remained calm. He didn't go on talk shows to brag. He didn't post on social media to celebrate. He knew that the movie wasn't about him. It was about the story. And now the story belonged to the people. A few weeks after the movie became a massive hit, a special event was held in Hollywood. It was a fancy party to celebrate the success of the film. The organizers wanted to make it a red carpet event with expensive gowns and flashing cameras. They wanted to treat Keanu like a king, but Keanu refused. He told them he wouldn't come if it was going to be about him. He said, "If we are going to have a party, let's have it for the crew. Let's have it in the warehouse where we built it." The organizers were confused, but they agreed. So, the final party wasn't at a luxury hotel. It was back in the old warehouse, the same place where they had filmed the rain scenes and the dangerous falls. The crew hung up simple white lights and brought in folding tables. There was no champagne fountain, just cold beer and boxes of pizza. Everyone was there. The carpenters, the electricians, the makeup artists, the young director, and even the tough stunt coordinator. They were all wearing their normal clothes, laughing and hugging each other. They looked like a family that had been through a war together and survived. Keanu walked in quietly. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He wore a simple jacket and jeans. When people saw him, they didn't scream or swarm him. They just smiled. They patted him on the back as he walked by. There was a deep respect in the room. They knew that without him, none of this would have happened. He found the young director standing near a table of pizza. The director looked exhausted but incredibly happy. He was holding the award they had won for Best Original Story. It was heavy and shiny. "Can you believe it?" the director asked, looking at the award. "We actually did it." Keanu grabbed a slice of pizza and leaned against the wall. "I always knew we could," he said. "The story was always good. It just needed someone to protect it. I couldn't have done it without you," the director said sincerely. "You saved my life. You saved this movie." Keanu shook his head. He took a bite of his pizza and looked around the room at the laughing crew. "I didn't save anything," Keanu said softly. "I just opened the door. You guys did the work. The truth was already there. We just had to clear away the junk so people could see it." The night went on. The warehouse was filled with music and stories about the shoot. They laughed about the time the ladder broke, and they cried remembering the emotional last scene. It was a celebration of humanity, not of fame. As the party started to wind down, Keanu realized it was time for him to go. He wasn't one for long goodbyes. He didn't want to be the center of attention. He wanted the movie to be the star. He grabbed his helmet and leather jacket. He walked out the back door of the warehouse into the cool night air. The Hollywood sign glowed in the distance on the hill. It looked different tonight. It didn't look like a symbol of a greedy industry. It looked like a place where dreams could still come true if you were willing to fight for them. He walked over to his motorcycle. The engine was cold, but it roared to life with a familiar sound. Before he put his helmet on, he took one last look at the warehouse. He could hear the muffled sound of his friends laughing inside. He smiled to himself. Keanu knew that this movie was just the beginning. It was a message to Hollywood that you cannot replace the human heart with a machine. The studios had learned a lesson they wouldn't forget. They would be scared of Keanu Reeves now, not because he was a tough action hero, but because he was a man who knew the truth. He put on his helmet, kicked the bike into gear, and sped off into the darkness. He disappeared into the city streets just as quietly as he had arrived. The something big had come, and it had changed everything. But for Keanu, the best part wasn't the fame or the money. It was the simple fact that for a little while, he had helped the world see the truth again, and as the taillights of his bike faded away, Hollywood felt a little more real, and a little less fake than it had in a very long time.